or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Deepak is with us this morning, and it's really, really early in the morning for him. It's what, 3 a.m. for you, Deepak?
Correct, 3 a.m. here in Melbourne.
Yeah, so I'm so thankful you came in and got up so early to join us. But I see some people are already letting us know where they're coming in from. We do have about 500 people registered today, so we're going to give them just another minute or two to get logged in and get their audio set up. While they're doing that, if you can just let me know where you're coming in from in the world. So I can see we've got Stefan from Switzerland, Tom from Austin, Texas, and Christopher from Port Jefferson, New York. Ooh, they're coming in quick. Let's see, Thomas from Dallas, Pennsylvania. Michelle, nice to have another Michelle on here from Maryland. Great to have you. Angela from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Excellent. We've got someone in from Zurich, and it's going so fast I'm not going to be able to read all of them. Looks like we've got some in from Mexico. St. Paul, Minnesota. Carl from South Africa, welcome. Nigeria, we've got some from the UK and Brazil. I love it. I love having such a global audience. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to, sit with us and have a conversation with us. Very exciting. Welcome, Matt from Calgary, Alberta. Great. David from Central Illinois. All right. So Deepak was telling me it's about 14 degrees Celsius. What did we say that was equivalent to Fahrenheit? About
56 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, so nice and warm where you are. I think right now it's about 36 degrees Fahrenheit. It's still early enough in the morning, which would be maybe 6 degrees Celsius. Today it should warm up though quite a bit, up to about 50 degrees. Since I'm in Utah, so we get a very drastic change in degrees throughout the day, just because we are in the desert. So, all right, looks like we have Nestor coming in from Argentina. Excellent. Yeah, very diverse crowd today. I love it.
Fantastic.
Yes. And it does look like the numbers are starting to steady off. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. At least by the time I finish the introductions, more people will be in. So with that, again, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you on this month's BIM Manager Community Virtual Meetup. This month, we're going to be talking about efficiently coordinating clashes across all disciplines. So I have Deepak Manning with me here today to talk about how he does it with Navisworks. And he's actually going to show you a little bit of BIM 360 as well. So I'm excited to be able to see both products back to back. It's always fun. That way you can really see the power of both products and make that informed decision of what kind of workflow is going to work best for you. So, looks like, there it goes. Okay. It was a little bit of delay when I clicked. All right, so again, we've got Deepak Manning. Those of you that aren't familiar with Deepak is out of Australia, in Melbourne, Australia. He's with the CAD group, and he's the National Technical Manager. I know Deepak for many years of going to Autodesk University together, and in fact, he has ranked in the top speakers for at least the last 5 years running, haven't you? Has it been 5 or more?
Yeah, it's been a bit more, but yeah.
Yeah. So great speaker. I'm very excited to have him. I think you guys will agree he does a great job. And so I'm really looking forward to that. For those of you that are new to the Meetup program or new to our webinars here, just to let you know, we do have the lines muted. Now, that doesn't mean that you get to stay silent the whole time. I do encourage, in fact, I often will request it if they're not coming in. I do encourage you to ask questions, and that's one reason why I have you type in where you're coming from in the question panel so that you know where that question panel is. It also gives me a chance to get to know you. But the meetups are really meant to bring together this community and allow you to network with your peers. And so, knowing what each other are doing, how does your workflow look different than the workflow that we're presenting today? And being able to share that, because when one person finds success in one way, I think a lot of people can benefit from that. And so we encourage you to share your successes, share your struggles, and maybe someone can help you find the success that you're looking for through that challenge that you're facing. So, but again, the lines are muted just so that we can record this. And so definitely ask those questions in the question pane. And when this is all said and done, everyone that attended or registered will receive a copy of the recording. There we go. All right, so again, our virtual meetups, we have several virtual meetups. You can see all of them listed there. We just started the building engineer meetup last month. In fact, it was last week, the fourth Thursday of the month. That was exciting because we had quite a big crowd and very, very interactive. So that was great. And just again, the meetups are meant for a way for you to connect with experts, to talk about best practices, have that live discussion. And so if you are open, as you have questions, you can either raise your hand in the audience panel or the attendees panel so that I can open up your line for that question to be shared live, or you can type it into the question panel and I can repeat that question for Deepak and he can answer that. So. Sometimes we have the product teams come in and provide updates. In fact, I think we've got one scheduled for May to talk about the updates in Navisworks for this group. So, all right. Now, most of our meetups are connected to courses as well to provide a little bit of a hybrid learning. And so the courses that they're connected to are the connected learning courses under autodesk.com/connected learning. And in fact, this course specifically, or this meetup specifically, is connected to a course in the analysis learning path under BIM Managers. So definitely go check that out. We love to hear your input, and again, let us know what workflows are working for you, and if the workflows that we suggest aren't working, let us know that, because we're always looking to improve and help you improve along the way. So, all right, so with that, Deepak, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm excited to see what you have to show us today.
Thank you, Michelle. I want to start with, first of all, again, thanking you for giving me the opportunity. I absolutely love sharing my knowledge and also love sharing my experiences of what I've been doing in the last 20 years in the industry. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. All right, so I'm going to start with why do we need to run flash tests? So with the BIM adoption going off the roof pretty much in every continent in the world, more and more projects are now becoming BIM enabled, and the projects need to be delivered with certain budgets and within certain timelines. And that's why running clash detection is becoming an integral part of any project delivery. So why do we need to run clashes? To avoid issues like this. I think I know where this is in the world. I'm not going to name the city because it's somewhere here. So to avoid issues like this, or to avoid issues like this. So this is one of our customers who sent us this image. I even showed this at my Autodesk University class last year as well. And to avoid issues like this is something that I got from LinkedIn. Michelle, it was funny that there was a caption for this image, and the caption said, "Don't worry about the structural integrity of the building. The plumbing would always work." Now, I normally put some interesting images here, and this one here I just have put because I want to mention this really important thing, that no matter how good a technology we use, it can't be idiot proof. So if somebody needs to do something stupid, they will end up finding a way to do it. So technology can only take us to certain extent, but from there on, we also need to use our own intelligence to make sure that we are making informed and right decisions. All right, there's one really important rule that I always tell people to remember. and that is that fully coordinated projects do not mean clash-free. So fully coordinated doesn't mean clash-free. It means clashes detected and reviewed. A very good example is valid penetrations. So for valid penetrations, you don't have to model penetrations at the initial stages, and depending on what your scope of work is, you may not even have to model penetrations. So when you are signing your BIM contract, please be mindful of this, that if the BIM contract says it needs to be a fully coordinated project, you need to clarify that fully coordinated does not really mean clash-free. It means that clash is detected and reviewed. We have a multi-million dollar, actually hundreds of $1 million of litigation going on here on a project where somebody signed a contract that said fully coordinated, did not clarify, and it became a big issue because the expectations was that it was a massive hospital project, and the expectation was that it'll be a clash-free project. There is no way you could deliver a project of that size, which is 100% clash-free. So please be mindful when you're signing your BIM contracts as to what your scope of work is and what you're going to deliver. So moving on, setting up clashes is an important process, but it can also be really easy if you plan ahead. Planning ahead, and the first step of planning ahead is to set up your search sets to run clash tests. In Navisworks, we've got two things. We've got selection sets and we've got search sets. So selection set is where we manually select elements and then we save them with a name, for example, mechanical ductwork. The problem with that is, let's say we manually select all ducts on level 1 and then we save them as level 1 ducts. And then we run a clash test with structure. And then when the mechanical consultant goes and models new ducts on level 1, the selection set is static. It's not going to pick up the new ductwork, which means when you're running clashes, it is not going to include the new ductwork in running your subsequent clash tests. That's why it's really important for us to set up search sets. One, search sets will pick up any new items modeled in that category. For example, mechanical ductwork. When you set up search sets, it will pick up new items or new ducts that have been modeled. The second advantage of having a search set model, search sets in the model, is that it can be exported as a template and imported in any new project. And this is what I'm going to show you in this live presentation. So let me switch over to Navisworks. This is my Navisworks model here. And I know that there's a bit of delay, so I'll try to go slower. As you could see, it's a multidisciplinary model. I've got structure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, architecture in this. Now, as I said, we can manually go and select elements. So I could go into level 1. I could go and select level 1 ducts, duct fittings, accessories, and so on. And I can save it as a selection set in my sets window. But that's something that I strongly recommend not to do. Avoid selection sets as much as you can. In some cases, you might have to do it if you're doing 4D construction simulation and so on. But for clash templates or setting up clash templates, I'm going to use this window here called Find Items window, because this window lets me create my search sets by finding items based on their categories. Now, I'm going to start with creating some structure sets. So if I go and hide everything except for structure, the first question that I get asked quite often is, what do we search for? What do we base our searches on? And the answer is really simple, because your projects might have different elements coming from different programs. It could even have IFC elements in there. So all you do is click on the element that you want to search and look at your properties window. Because this is a Revit-based project, I could go into the element tab and I can see all these different element properties for this particular item that I selected. In my case, the property that I'm interested in is this element category. So this element category property is telling me that it's a structural column. And this is where I need to think about it. Do I search for element category equals structure columns, or do I search for a type of structure column? And again, it all comes down to what exactly is your search set being used for. If you are using your search sets for doing 4D construction simulation, then you might want to install certain types of columns on certain levels. So that's where you have to filter down to all these levels and type and so on. But if your search set is being used for clash tests, then you're better off making it as generic, but still as specific as possible. So for example, in this case, I could go and say, I'm looking for elements that have categories equal structural columns. So in your first selection here is the tab where the property is sitting. If you're working on projects that have got IFC elements, there would be an IFC tab that would have that property. So your first selection is the tab on which the item is sitting, which in my case is element. So I'm going to go into this drop-down list here. I'll type in E for element. My second selection is the property that I'm looking for, which in this case is category. So I'm going to go into my second drop-down list, and I'll say I'm looking for C for category. And now I can say I'm looking for element category, which equals to what I'm looking for. So in this case, I'm looking for structural columns. As soon as I do that, I can now go and click on this button here that says find all. And now it goes and finds 249 structural columns. Once it's found all these structural columns, I can now save this as a search set, and I could call it as structural columns. So the whole idea now is next time when I need to pick my structural columns, whether to run clash test or to control the visibility, I could simply click here. And because it is a search set, when the structural consultant goes and models more structural columns, it would still pick them up because we are running a search in the background when we are selecting these elements. So that's our search set here to pick structural columns. Now, the next question that we go to ask ourselves is, what do we want to do with the structural framing? Do we want to keep it separate? Because the structural framing are under their own category called structural framing. So if we want to keep them separate, we could create a new search set called element category equals structural framing, and then save it as a search set. Or alternatively, you could pick columns and framing in the same search set. So for that, I could go and say E for element, C for category, equals, and from here, I can go and say structural framing. Now, normally, if I was doing this live in front of the audience, I would ask the question, what do you reckon I'm going to find if I click on find now here? But to make it easier, I'll say, I'll tell you this here, that if I click on find now, I won't find anything. And the reason I would not find anything is because by default, all these additional rows that we add in the search conditions are and conditions. So it's looking for items that are structural columns and framing. Now, we don't have items that are column and framing. So that's where I can right click on the second row and I can change this to or condition. So now when I go and say find all, it is going to find items that are columns or framing, and it's going to select all of them. So as you could see here, it's now found 2,265 elements. And now I could save this as a search set called structural columns and framing. And then that brings us to the question, what do we want to do with the foundations? Do we want to include foundations also in the same search set? The answer is yes, we could do that. So we could add a third row here called element category equals structural foundation and make it or condition. But instead of doing that, we could actually make our search sets smarter by including all three of them in one row. And to do that, I'm going to go and say, instead of saying element category equals structural columns, I'm going to go and say element category contains, and I can type in structural, structural. The key here is that when you're typing in anything in this field, make sure you press enter after you have finished typing in. So structural, press enter. If you do not press enter, in a lot of cases, we have noticed that it does not register what you have typed in. So make sure you press enter. The second thing is make sure that if you are not typing it in the right case, this match case tick box should be cleared. So if I use lowercase s, if the match case tick box is turned on, it will not find anything because it is looking for items with the matching case. But in this case, I've typed it in uppercase, so I'll be fine. I'm going to go and say find all. And now it goes and finds 2,818 items, which includes structural column, structural framing, and structural foundations. And now I can save this as a new search set called structure. Now, normally I keep flooring or slabs out of it because normally I do not include flooring as part of the same clash test, because flooring, you might want to run clashes, but you might want to ignore the clashes with the flooring initially because it is valid penetrations and things like that. So that's how you create your search sets. In this case, I just created my search set in one row only by using contains instead of equals in my condition. So that's my first search set. The second one that I want to create is for mechanical ductwork. And again, for mechanical ductwork, if I go and hide everything else except for mech ductwork. For mechanical ductwork also, we've got a number of different items. So we've got items that are, in this case, element categories that are ducts. Then you would have your duct accessories. You would have your duct fittings. So if I, for example, click on this item here, it's air terminal, and you could have your mechanical equipment in here. So depending on what item you click on, there could be a number of different types of duct elements. So that's why when we are creating our search sets for mechanical ductwork, what I normally recommend is to say element categories contains, I type in DUCT. Now, the reason I've typed in DUCT and not DUCTS is because ducts are listed as element categories equals ducts, as you could see here. But the accessories and fittings are duct, so DUCT accessories and DUCT fittings, duct fittings and duct accessories. And I know this because this is a Revit-based project, and I have already created these search sets a lot of times. But this is where you got to be careful if you're doing it for the first time, especially on a newish project, which has got elements that are not really coming from Revit. They could be coming from Civil 3D. They could be coming from Plant 3D. They could be coming from other non-Autodesk products. They could be in IFC format and so on. So that's why it's important for you to click on the element and look at the properties to figure out what you need to search. So let's unhide all, and I'm going to go and say element categories contains duct. I'll say find all. It goes and finds 9,195 elements. So if I say hide unselected, that's all the elements it has found. Now, again, this is brilliant, but there's one little problem. And that little problem is the fact that it has actually gone and found flexible ducts as well. So the question that we got to ask ourselves is, do we need to really pick these flexible ducts? Because practically for clash tests, we don't really need to do it, especially at the initial stages, because flexible ducts, by virtue of their name, they are flexible. So they can be flexed around other elements. So the question we got to ask ourselves is, how do we now deselect these flexible ducts? And I have seen a lot of clash tests where people go and create rules to ignore flex ducts. Now, we don't really need to go to that extent to create rules to ignore flex ducts. What we can do is we can say element, C4 category, equals, and from here, I'm going to pick flex ducts. And I'm going to use this really powerful feature of search sets called negate condition. So if I right click on the second row, I can select this option here called negate condition. This is really powerful. what it would do is it'll find all the element categories that contains duct, and then will remove or deselect flex ducts out of them. So if I go and say find all now, as you could see, it finds everything and then deselects all the flex ducts out of them. How cool is that? So it's a really powerful feature of our search sets that not too many people are aware of. I strongly recommend you guys use this. There's one important rule that you got to follow, and that is the negate condition should immediately follow the condition that it needs to negate from. The point I'm trying to make is that if I need to pick, let's say, all the mech equipment as well, if I say E for element, C for category equals mechanical equipment, if this third row was above the negate condition, then it will not work, because negate condition will try to negate flex ducts out of mechanical equipment, which doesn't make sense. So that's why the third row of mech equipment should be after negate. So negate should immediately follow the condition from which you need to remove or deselect elements. So I'm going to right click on this third row here. I'll go and say OR. So that means we are looking for all duct elements. We want to remove flex ducts out of it, but we also want to include mech equipment. So if I say unhide all, I'll say find all, and now it has found 9,432 elements, and we can see here, these are all the elements. I can now save this as, let's say, mech ductwork. So this is our mechanical ductwork search set. I want to create one last one here, which is plumbing. And again, the reason I want to do plumbing is because it's got some really important feature that I want to show here. So let's say I'm going to go delete all conditions. So for plumbing elements, if I go and say hide unselected, let me go and pick one of these pipes, for example, here. So what we are looking for is element category contains pipe. The reason we say pipe is because, again, pipe fittings are listed as pipe fittings, not pipes fitting. So let's go here. I'll say E for element, C for category, contains PIPE. Now, if I say find all, and let's do this, and then I'm going to say hide unselected. So what it's done is it's gone and selected pipes that are not really plumbing pipes. So they could be hydraulics, they could be electrical, they could be fire, and so on. So that's why we need to now go and filter all the plumbing pipes out of the rest of the pipes. And that's where for most of these pipes, there would be some additional conditions you could use. So for example, you could use material contains PVC and so on. But the category that I prefer using is this one here called system classification. So most of these pipes would have their system classification. In this case, I'm going to look for system classification equals sanitary. So I'll say E for element, and then I'll go and find system classification. Here equals, and I can go and say that's sanitary. Now I'm going to leave this as AND condition because I'm looking for pipes that are sanitary pipes. If I say find all, so now as you could see here, it only finds these plumbing pipes. And then if you want to include the fixtures, we can go and say E for element, C for category equals plumbing fixtures. I can't see plumbing fixtures here. That's because it has not loaded all the values. So I'll click on these three dots here, and that's where it loads all the values. I'm going to go and say fixtures. I'll make this as OR condition. So now when I go and say find all, it now finds 3,858 elements, which includes our plumbing pipes and plumbing fixtures. And now I can save this as a search set called plumbing. So this way we can build our library of search sets. Now, one of the things that I strongly recommend is to categorize your search sets in folders. So I could create a folder here called MEP, and I can have all my MEP search sets in this folder. Similarly, I could go and create a new folder called structure, and I could have all my structural elements in that folder. So this way, we can categorize all our search sets in different folders depending on what our project looks like, or maybe generic, just architecture, structure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and so on. So that's our first rule where we are planning for future, where we are planning ahead. As I said, the second advantage of search sets is that we can now export it as a template. So I can click on this little flyout here on the top right of my sets window, and I can say export search sets. It lets me export these search sets, and I could call it as, let's say, virtual meetup sets, enter. So the whole idea is that if I go and delete these now, it could be a brand new project. I could simply go in here and I can say import my search sets. And I can double click on this and it brings in all my search sets. Please note that if you would have created selection sets, it would not export selection sets because they can't be exported. And this is pretty much what I have done. I have created a massive library of search sets that I use, which in this case, I'm going to import. So I've got this folder here where I've got my search sets, and these are all Revit categories. Similarly, I've got search sets for civil categories. I've got search sets for some IFC categories and so on. But because this is a Revit-based project, I'm going to import my Revit categories. And as you could see here, I've got my Revit architecture categories where I've got my casework, seating, columns, etc., etc. Let's just reset this window. Similarly, I've got my MEP categories where I've got my terminals, cable trays, conduits, duct items, duct accessories, fittings, etc. And similarly, structural elements. So that's our step number one. To make sure we plan ahead, we create our search sets so we could save them as templates and import them in any new project. So then once we have done this, we are now ready to run our clash test. If you are watching this at a later stage, on the next slide, I have actually shown you some examples of how I've created my search sets. So for example, in case of structure, I search for element category contains structural. Similarly, mechanical ductwork was element category contains duct, and then we negated flex ducts, and then we added another category called equipment, and then we changed it to or condition. So these are all the different types of search sets that you could create. And again, you could get a bit more innovative with your search sets, and you could include some more of this information. Next, we are ready to run our clash test. So I want to create some clash tests here. Again, if you regularly run your clash tests, you would know that generally they are categorized in 3 different categories. We've got level 1 clashes, which is our critical clashes that have to be resolved with first priority. And that includes our mech ductwork versus structure, mech ductwork versus plumbing, cable trays, etc. Then we've got level 2, so it keeps coming down in priority. I want to start with creating my mech ductwork versus structure clash test. Let me go and restore my clash workspace. I normally work with these workspaces because that way I don't have to hide and unhide windows on a regular basis. So I'm going to add a clash test here. I'm going to call it as mech ductwork versus structure. If I could spell it right, obviously. All right. So in my selection here, instead of selecting the files, I'm going to go into my selection drop-down list. And as I want to use sets from the MEP category, let me just drag this up a bit. I want to say, pick all the duct items and mechanical equipment. So in this search set, I've kept them separate. The example I showed you was where I created a single search set for these. And then I want to say sets, structure, columns, foundation, framing. I'm running it as a hard test with surfaces. I've got tolerance of 0.4 of an inch. So actually it should be 0.04 of an inch. And then composite object flashing is turned on, which means that if, for example, we've got a pipe going through a wall and the wall is a composite object made up of, let's say, brick, veneer, insulation, metal studs, framing, and so on. When the pipe runs through it, do we want to display it as a single clash or 5 separate clashes? With this tick box selected, it'll ensure that it is displayed as a single clash, which is how it should be, because once we fix the pipe location, it's going to fix all the 5 clashes. So selecting this tick box is important. It ensures that we are not unnecessarily showing our clashes more than what they should be. With this, I'm going to click on this Run Test button. As soon as I click on this Run Test button, it says there are a total of 401 clashes found. And if I look at my clashes, these are all these 401 clashes that I've got available. I can go through them one by one and have a look. But before we look at the clash results, what I'll do is I'll quickly go and add one more clash test. So I'll go and say Add Test. This would be, let's say, mech ductwork versus plumbing. And again, for my selection, I'm going to go into Sets. I'll say Duct Items and Equipment. And for my second selection, I'm going to go and say Plumbing. Run Test, and we've got these 43 clashes found now. So let's now look at our clash results. The first thing that I normally do is see how I've got all these other elements around my clashes that are displayed as dimmed elements. That's because I've got dim others turned on. Let me hide this area. So we've got this. So in the clash detective window, we've got this area here called display settings. On the display settings area, we've got this button turned on called dim others. Now I could also turn this option called hide others, but I'm not a big fan of this because it doesn't give me a contextual awareness of where this clash is. I prefer dim others. Now the problem with this is with all these elements around the clashing elements, it's becoming a bit harder for me to see what's going on, especially when you're working on high-rise clashes. This is where I strongly recommend you guys control the dimming transparency and make it a bit more or a bit dimmer. How do we do that? I'll go to my global options, and that's F12 key on the keyboard. So if I press the F12 key on the keyboard, that's my options editor, which is my global options. I'll go under Tools, Clash Detective, and I've got this option here called Dimming Transparency. I'm going to change this to 0.98. So by setting it to 0.98, as you could see, the elements around the clashing items are a lot dimmer, and it's easier for me to see all these elements. So similarly, I can look at these clash results to see what's going on. Now, in this case, it's telling me that there are a total of 401 clashes. Personally, that's not the right way of organizing these clashes. I'm a big fan of grouping clashes, and I'm a big fan of grouping clashes based on levels. If you use some of the add-ins, there are a lot of add-ins available that you could use for grouping clashes. In this meetup, I want to show you everything just absolutely out of box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group, for example, all level 5 clashes. So now the question that I get asked is, do you group based on the HVAC element, or do you group based on structural element? And that's the question that you got to ask yourself. My general criteria is that it should be grouped based on the elements that would be modified. So in this case, we are going to modify mechanical ductwork, not structure. That's why I'll go into my item 1 area here. I'll pick level 1, and I'll click on this, pick level 5 here, and I'll pick this button here that says group clashes involving items. So what this would do is it would group all level 5 clashes. And as you could see, my total number of clashes have come down from 404 clashes to 285. I'm going to rename this to level 5 clashes, and I'm going to hide this group. So that's my level 5 clashes here. This is also a good model audit tool because I can see a duct here, which definitely is not on level 5. So it's a good model audit tool as well. Similarly, I'll go to the next one. I'll pick level 4 from here. I'll say group clashes, and I'll call this as level 4 clashes. And I can, let me actually copy this name, and I can close this group as well. So that's one thing that I strongly recommend, which is grouping clashes. The second thing that you could do is you could actually right click on a clash and you can assign it to the individuals. So for example, if I need to assign a clash to for Michelle, I can go and say assign, and I can assign it to Michelle, and I can say, please review and let me know how to fix this. Okay. So I've assigned this clash to Michelle. Similarly, I could also assign an entire group. So if I right click on this group, I could go and say assign to please check and fix. So this way we can assign clashes and we can group them and so on. Let me just quickly group this clash. I'll call this as level 3 clash. So now the question that I get asked is, this is okay, but how would Michelle know what clashes has she been assigned, what clashes should she look for, and so on? And this is where we could go into our review ribbon tab, and you can go into this button here that says find comments. So when I click on find comments, if I don't type anything and simply go and say find, it goes and finds all these clashes that have been assigned to Michelle. So as you could see here, we assigned this group to Michelle. As soon as I click on it, it takes us to that group. Similarly, I could go and say clash number 2, clash number 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. So all these clashes that have been assigned to Michelle, we can easily find them by clicking on this button here called find comments. Alternatively, if you want to, obviously there would be clashes assigned to others and so on. If you want to find clashes only assigned to Michelle, you can type in Michelle under text, but make sure you put it under an asterisk. So asterisk, because if you do not enclose it in the asterisk, it will not find the text. So just be a bit mindful of that. Let's just go back in here. Let's hide these clashes, hide these ones as well. I'll just quickly group this as well. And I can say this is level 2 clashes. And then lastly, level 1 clashes. So this is our Navisworks file where we've run these clashes and we have grouped clashes and so on. So Navisworks, as you could see, is extremely powerful when it comes to running clash tests, because we can make our search sets really smart. We can run clashes, we can ignore certain elements, we can assign clashes and so on. So Navisworks is fantastic when it comes to running clash tests. However, it is not a program which is really good with managing clashes. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say we have run this clash test. Now I need to issue this file to all the consultants for them to fix. So obviously, I have to then upload this NWD file for the consultants to download, for them to review, and so on. Now that brings us to this question: what if Michelle's going through some of these clashes and she realizes that she's been asked to drop this duct down by 200 mil, or let's say by a couple of inches, but she can't do it for some reason? And it could be because it's affecting some other services, or it could be causing problem with the entire system and so on. So if Michelle needs to talk to me about this, she will have to add comments within this file and then issue me this file. And then I have to keep a track of file that came from Michelle. Similarly, from other consultants and so on. And suddenly 6 months down the line, we've got no idea as to which file had what information. And that's where Autodesk came up with this really smart feature inside BIM 360 called Navisworks issues. So the workflow that we use now is we take this file and we upload it onto our BIM 360 project. So if I go into my BIM 360 tab here, on my projects, I've got a folder called NWD file, which is where I issue all my NWD files. So everybody who's working on the project can now open this NWD file and look at the clash results in Navisworks. So how does it work? In Navisworks, when you're opening the file, so instead of opening the file from your local drive, you need to have your desktop connector installed. And I could go into my desktop connector and I could say, so in this case, I'll go and say this PC, because that's where you get to the desktop connector from. You go into your BIM 360 option here. You go into the account where the project is hosted. I'm a member of different accounts, so you could see all this here. And then you go to your project. So in this case, it's the project here. Desktop connector can only look at the project files. So it goes to the project files folder, and I can go into my NWD files and I can open the file from here. So no uploading the files through Dropbox or through different places. We keep our file at one single location here. That's one of the advantages. The second advantage is that when people open this file within BIM 360, so now this is the file open within BIM 360, I can look at different views and so on. But most importantly, if I'm doing something, I could control the visibility of the elements. So let's say if I go into my model browser, I'll say I'm only interested in looking at the HVAC and the structure file and not the other elements. So I can hide those elements or make them transparent, and I can look at these things here. So if I go to a location where I was supposed to drop a duct down by a couple of inches or by 10 inches or whatever it is, and I can't do it, instead of me creating that comment in the NWD file and sending somebody the NWD file, I could actually do that within BIM 360. So within BIM 360 environment, I could go and say create issues, and I can create the issues here. But the best thing is when I open that file in Navisworks, so I'm now opening this file in Navisworks. And I can now download my BIM 360 issues. So I'll click on this button here, and I can say refresh, and it will start to download my BIM 360 issues. Now, one thing that I normally recommend is when you're creating BIM 360 issues, make sure you type in the discipline as the initials of your issues, because I know that this is the HVAC issue, which has got problems with beams. So I can go into my selection tree, and I can say, I want to hide everything except for structure and HVAC. So when I click on this issue here, it takes me to that location, and other elements are hidden, which means that it makes it easier for me to review this. I can see that the issue that was created was ductwork is too close to the beams, so it's going to affect other things. And now I can start commenting on this issue, and I can start taking actions on these issues within Navisworks. And these comments and things that I do here would actually then be available within BIM 360 also for us to review. So I can go and change this to not approved or ready to inspect or work completed or whatever it is. And when I go into my BIM 360, when I hit refresh, it actually shows me the change in the status of that issue here. I can also look at that issue. I can see what are all the other comments added to it and so on. So this is a really cool workflow that we've got available, where we upload the NWD files within BIM 360 and use it as our single source of truth for all the issues and all the comments that we have for each other, rather than putting it in the NWD files and uploading them on Dropboxes and so on. So if you haven't tried BIM 360 issues for Navisworks, I would strongly recommend you guys do that. Please make sure you've got desktop connector installed for it, and that would let you take care of all those things. So with this, that's all I have in the live demonstration. I will hand it over back to Michelle. Michelle, you want to take over and we can go through some questions if we have any?
Yes, absolutely. So one question that came in, if I use Navisworks and BIM 360, do I need BIM 360 glue? Actually, what you want is the BIM 360 coordinate option, which will give you the option to do some clash detection.
Yes, spot on. So first of all, let's go back to the question that was asked. Actually, you do not need glue. However, there's with glue, which is the classic BIM 360 program, there is a really good workflow. But the workflow that I showed you here, we do not use glue. We just use Navisworks and we use BIM 360 docs. But as Michelle mentioned, if you've got BIM 360 glue, which in next gen is called BIM 360 coordinate, then it lets you run automatic clashes. So you can upload your files in a folder and you can create that as your coordination space, and it does automatic clashes for you, and then you can create issues. But in this workflow that I showed you, I did not use glue or coordinate. I just used Navisworks and docs.
Great. Excellent. And so the next question, I have an issue with the desktop connector. It makes my computer very, very slow. Whenever I open the File Explorer, the computer just stops working, and it takes like 5 minutes to only open the File Explorer. So
okay, that's sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that actually is an interesting question. There was an Autodesk University class run by a girl named Luciani. She's based out of UK. She's actually a BIM 360 support specialist. If you go into the Autodesk University page and search for a class by a girl named Luciani, so Lusiane, she's an Autodesk, as I said, support personnel. The class was called BIM 360 desktop connector for BIM 360 or something like that. She actually covered a lot of troubleshooting issues in that class as well. Because she's a support specialist, she gets a lot of questions asked like that. And then you can search for that class and you can go through the handout. She wrote a really cool handout where she covered all those troubleshooting issues. And you can go through those issues and see if they help you fix a problem. If not, that I would strongly recommend logging a case with Autodesk support. But that class was a really good class.
Remind me the name that you said who taught that?
It's Luciani. So let me actually get you the exact name. Luciane. And then her last name is Taylor. She's got two last names, so Luciani Consenso Taylor. But if you search for Lucianetaylor, you'll be able to find her class. As I said, really good class. She talked about a number of different troubleshooting issues. Being a support specialist herself, she wanted to cover issues like what you just mentioned.
Right. So the next question, is this a problem with my computer? Oh, I guess that's following up with the other question, or how can I manage this issue? So definitely go take a look at that class that he was talking about. And Philip, thank you. Philip actually wrote the spelling in there for me, so I'll be able to put that full spelling in for you. And that's all the questions. Are there any other questions that you'd like me to open up your lines for? Don't be shy. We're all here to learn from each other. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Michelle is saying, thank you, great webinar, great presentation. Thanks from Michael. Excellent. And it was. I love how in-depth you got into the subject, Deepak. Sometimes people gloss over, clash detection and don't show you all those little tips and tricks about the search sets and everything that you showed. So I really appreciate you going so in-depth into that, because if you get those search sets right, you can just use it across projects, just like Deepak showed you.
Correct, exactly. So as a matter of fact, one of the things that I talk about is how to then export these clash tests as templates as well, that you can import in any new project. So this is the class, if you can still see my screen, this is the class that she did, setting up and using desktop connectors for BIM 360 docs. I just went on to the Autodesk University website and I typed in LUCIANE, and that's the class. That's a really nice handout, 57 pages handout that she wrote. You can go through various troubleshooting sections and then see if that helps.
Great. Excellent. So we have quite a few questions coming in. So I'm glad that everyone is throwing those out there. So one question that came in, are the courses for Civil 3D workflow? So the courses in the connected learning are actually a combination of Civil 3D and Revit files. And so it goes through a workflow that combines the architectural and the infrastructure content. So that way you can, kind of get to know how you can work across teams, across consultants, and across products. So that's why we've called it connected learning. It's that connection between everybody. Okay, and the next.
I like it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the next one is Marcel is saying, do you expect that BIM 360 Coordinate will replace Navisworks for clash detection soon? At the moment, it's still far away from Navisworks. So that's a really great question. I love that you asked this because, like we were saying at the very beginning, we're trying to show you some different workflows, and not every this workflow that Deepak showed will not work for everybody. It won't work for every project. And so, Marcelo, it really depends on what you need to do as far as, what workflow you might incorporate. So that's something, if you do want to work with a consultant or someone, you can definitely do that to ask some of those very specific questions about your projects to make sure that you're implementing the right workflow before you get too far down the line and have to go backwards. So I always recommend that. That way, you can save yourself a lot of rework later on. I don't like to do rework too much, so.
Correct, spot on. And you are actually absolutely right, Michelle. Different projects have got different restrictions and conditions. So some projects may, for example, a lot of defense projects here in this country, they don't allow using cloud-based technology that is based outside the country. So defense projects are really particular about that. So that's why it's hard to use BIM 360 on those projects. That's where Navisworks is really handy. But again, there could be certain projects where a lot of infrastructure projects these days are BIM 360 based, so we can use BIM 360 Coordinate on those.
All right, so Horatio is asking the question, how can we determine which discipline is the right one that needs to be modified just after the clash detection? So that is going to vary by project as well. And what I would highly recommend is having some project coordination meetings. Have the BIM manager go ahead and run that clash detection, send out the report to all the disciplines involved, and then come together and talk about, what's going to be best for that project, because sometimes you might not be able to leave the structural elements right where they are. Maybe you do have to move them, in which case, you have to recalculate so many of the members. So again, it is going to be project by project. Do you have anything else to add to that, Deepak?
Absolutely, you're spot on, Michelle. So normally in the project kickoff meetings, we talk about the hierarchy of the disciplines and the hierarchy of the elements. So for example, in most cases, mechanical would have higher priority over plumbing, except for certain systems where it's gravity controlled and so on. So different projects would have different requirements. And as you said, in your project kickoff meetings, you go through your BIM execution plans, because most of these things would be detailed in your BIM execution plans.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining, and we're right at the top of the hour, so I want to thank again Deepak. You did a wonderful job. I love watching your presentations every time, so thank you for taking the time, especially at 3 a.m. I'm very impressed that you got up that early to present and share your expertise. So
thank you. I'm actually thinking about it now. Do I go back to bed because it's 4 a.m. now, or do I stay awake and just go and have my breakfast?
I love my sleep, so I'd be for going back to bed, but Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. There were a couple questions that came in. I'll go ahead and answer those offline. But if you would like to share more, definitely go out to the Navisworks forums and start talking to each other. You know, build that community and get to know the other people using Navisworks and how they're doing it on their projects, because you might have a challenging project that you need their help on. So thanks again, and we'll see you guys next month.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Bye-bye.